In a world filled with conflict, in a universe comprised of differences, there's one thing that absolutely everything shares in common. We all exist. Including two guys named Jack and Michael, who like to chat about that very thing over a good cup of coffee. Let's pay them a visit, shall we?
Existence Brewing.
It's nice to see that they still have our seat available here.
Yeah, they saved that for us. I talked to them.
I know you did. I know you were like, hey, this is our spot. We have permanent dibs. And then that manager had a really bad attitude about it, too.
Well, managers are trained on how to have a bad attitude. That's part of manager training. They send you to that management training, and they're just like, the whole day is spent on how to have a superiority complex and a bad attitude with customers. And then there's how to have a superiority complex and a bad attitude with subordinates, employees, and on from there.
She covered all of those bases, I think, fairly well, because I think all of the employees don't like her.
Oh, it was the she manager.
Yeah, it was.
I thought it was the he manager.
No,
I thought
the he manager was gone a long time ago.
That was the first corporate pitch by Mattel, by the way. He manager.
He-Man.
They wanted to put him in a suit and be like, he pushes money all day and papers. He's he manager. Like, no, I don't think so.
Were you a He-Man fan?
Oh my God. I watched a special on that. It was a pretty interesting documentary solely devoted to He-Man and the toy craze of the 80s. I remember when it first came out in the early 80s. I want to say 82, 81, right in there.
Mm-hmm.
And they kind of just showed up out of nowhere. That was the cool thing, because before that, there were Star Wars figures. Those were the big action figures. They weren't big. They were 3.5 inchers, unless you had the blue snaggletooth, which I did, and my puppy chewed up. And it's sort of like $1,000. But anyway, it's all right. I loved Georgie. So I remember when they first hit the shelves, and I grew up on the hill and was kind of like, my story is a little bit like the Buddha, I like to think. I wasn't exactly sheltered from seeing people that didn't have as much money, but when you're a kid, you sort of think everybody kind of lives the same life that you do. And my brother and sister lived through the rougher years. They're older than me. And then suddenly my dad's company just took off, and, he was making $500,000 in the late 70s. So anyway, long story short, I'm getting everything that I want. Mom's buying it because we have the dough. And so toys were a regular, every week we go get a toy, and these Masters of the Universe things show up at the local toy store, and I'm just like, oh my God, I got to have all these. So of course, we got them all. But I was watching a special. I want to say it wasn't like a whole series purely devoted to Masters toys. That would be like probably too laboring, but it was about toys, nostalgic toys from the 70s and 80s, 60s. I guess G.I. Joe was in there. And they were talking to some of the former executives at Mattel, or the guys that were in charge of the Masters of the Universe wing as it became. And I'll just never forget the one guy's comment when they were talking about the absolute meteoric success of that toy line. He just looked into the camera and was kind of actually looking down in disgust, in, sort of in self-loathing 30 years after the fact, and just said, we reached into the pockets of so many American moms and dads and just took money over and over again. And he's right, because anybody that's ever actually analyzed the He-Man toy line realizes that the torso of every single fucking one is exactly the same. The torso and the legs are exactly the same. And then they just give it a different head and a different paint job and like some armor that's painted up differently, and that's it. I will say this, they were incredibly creative with some of the stuff they came out with. I mean, Stinkor, where they actually, the toy stank. It was like, smelled like a skunk. I want to say Cobra Khan was the snake-headed thing that squirted water, the spitting. I mean, Manny faces where you could turn the thing, and there was like different. I mean, I remember a lot of these because I, like you said, grew up with them. I was attached to them at the hip as a kid because, I was all about my material possessions. So anyway, I absolutely remember Masters of the Universe, and apparently they reached in, Mattel did, and took as much money out of my mother's pocket as anybody else because I had everything. Like I had the castle, Panther, I had it all. So.
Yeah, I was a huge fan of Legos, and I always thought the same thing about Legos. Talk about making money out of just little chunks of plastic, essentially. Oh,
that's insane now.
And, I think that the thing that really sets Lego apart from other toys that are really just garbage, because there's a lot of those toys that just eat at my children, and they want them, every single one of them, they want it. And it's just garbage, and it goes in the garbage 30 minutes after they open it. But I will say the creativity of Lego is what I think had made it a very huge success. Were Legos popular in your generation?
No, not as much, I don't think. I didn't play with Legos. They annoyed me, quite honestly, because it was just like, I don't know. I didn't really get much out of Legos. I had Lincoln Logs when I was a kid.
Oh, yeah,
that really dates me.
Too.
But I had Lincoln Logs. But what we would do with Lincoln Logs is we would play like Sasquatch Camp, and we would take like here's your He-Man figure example. So the Lincoln Logs quit getting played with, of course, at like age 6 or 7, but they sat around in the closet because mom just couldn't let you get rid of them, right?
Right.
So when friends had come to visit and it was He-Man time, it would be like, hey, these Lincoln Logs would be cool. Let's build a big log cabin and then have Grizzlor come along and he'll just smash the fucking thing to bits and then he'll rip up, because we hated the human characters. We just thought they were the biggest jokes, like Dr. Evil said, or not Dr. Evil, was Dark Helmet who said in Spaceballs, now you will see why good always, evil triumphs over good because good is dumb. And that's how we felt, was just these good guys are just, we see this schlock at a supermarket bagging groceries. He's not the guy that's going to triumph. We want these strange mutated creatures that come from parallel dimensions that have their shit together. These are the guys we want to win. They might be slightly nefarious in our judgment, but these are our heroes. So anyway, the Lincoln Logs were around.
I think that the Star Wars was the franchise that taught me that the evil side always had the cooler spaceships.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
and they always had the costumes that were just cooler.
And I was about to say, and I'm glad I checked on my phone here real quick, because I was about to say one of the He-Man toys I did not have was one called the Mad Bubbler, but then I thought, no, that doesn't belong to the He-Man horde. And so you can get a Mad Bubbler replica for, I don't know, $50-$100, but an actual real one. Last I knew, it was like $25,000 for a Thundercats toy. And that was probably 5 or 6 years ago that I saw that special. So that's probably gone up to, because one of those rocket launching Boba Fett's, and I remember that one too, the ones that, Kenner was trying to off a few kids, to help out the world by making them choke on the rocket launcher thing. Cause that's why and it was the original Boba Fett figure, his rocket thing, launched somehow. And it was a mail-in. You send in 5 proofs of purchase from other action figures to Young America, Minnesota, and they'd send you the figure. And only so many of those got out before they were like, okay, kids are choking on this shit, so we got to recall it. One of those just sold for over $500,000 at auction. So it's great to know that there are some people in the world that in this ridiculous illusory game that we play called money and the financial I'll just throw down $560,000 for an action figure. I mean, the paint was stripping off of it and everything. It wasn't even in really good condition, didn't look like, but it's rare.
Jeez, what's the ROI on that?
Well, and I'm one to talk because me and my $400 pieces of vinyl, or I have a CD that I paid $500 for. So we all, if we're collectors, I'm that cancer crab collector, we have that vibe. We'll drop it if we want it bad enough, and it's terrible, and I wish that I didn't possess that, but you kind of have to own who you are in some hardwired fashion too. But yeah, I remember Masters. It's funny, I was just thinking about Masters of the Universe walking down the street today, and I was thinking about my favorite original Masters of the Universe character, who was the neutral one. And he was only in one episode of the cartoon that I can ever remember, and it was Zodak. Zodak, the Cosmic Enforcer. And he was like the cop of the galaxy of this, he was okay, so we've got Skeletor and his evil minions, and then we've got He-Man and this delightful, benevolent camp that we have going on. And then Zodak was like the tax guy. He came in and was just like, okay, now I'm going to audit both of you. And I liked him. I liked the idea of a dude that was straight down the middle and didn't play on either team. And so I remember always liking Zodak more than the other ones.
I think if we ever design a line of bongs, we need to probably name them after the characters of He-Man, because you've got the Bubbler.
Well, that's Thundercats. So.
Oh, Thundercats.
Oh, yeah, we could do the Mad Bubbler. You've got, there's, like I said, there's a ton of them.
Yesterday, I actually introduced for the first time my children to what a dictionary is. And my oldest actually said that she had seen a dictionary before, and one of her middle school teachers, who I have to applaud, showed them how to use a dictionary. And I was like, oh, yeah, nice. That's really cool. So we were going through the paging through, and one of the things that she asked me, and I was like, okay, I need to ask Jack Hansen this because I'm sure he's going to know the word to explain this. So what is the word, or is there a word for when three people have an equal amount of years separating their age?
Oh, wow. I'm sure there probably is, but I don't know what it is. That's not in my vernacular.
Yeah, let me give you a context. So it was actually in our family, and she was like, there's a name for it. And she is exactly 7 years younger than her older cousin, and her younger cousin is actually 7 years younger than she is. So and I was like, equidistance, equiannual.
I was going to say equa is what it probably starts with equa, but
I was like, damn it, I didn't take Latin in high school.
Well, if it's 7 years too, then it could be specific to the digits. So you could be talking a septa equa now is what we're getting up to.
Let's just run with that. She's a septa equa.
But there'd have to be something that would imply family. So like septa equigenius or something like that.
Yes,
is
I like
probably fairly close. So yes, we just invented a word, septa equigenius. I know one of the words that falls into that camp that I like an awful lot is unasinous. And that was actually used in an episode of Schitt's Creek, the show with Catherine O'Hara and Eugene Levy and his son that was on. First watch through, I liked it. Second watch through, I actually decided I didn't like it all that much, but it doesn't matter what I think. It's just the character that Catherine O'Hara played in that sitcom was well known for having this incredibly not only bulging but also very turgid vernacular where she was better than everybody else. And because she was essentially just married to someone who was rich and never had to do anything except attend charity functions, and so she was a bit of a dilettante. And so in that, she grew this expansive catalog of words that she was attached to, but 50% of them nobody knew. And I loved her character because of the use of those words. I didn't care for, like her being kind of a bitch, for lack of a better term, I guess. But, but unasinous is a great word. That was made up by an author. It's not recognized by Merriam-Webster, but it means basically that when one idiot has an idea and everybody else goes along with it, that is being unasinous. So it's like the old, if your friend, if one guy jumped off the cliff, would you all do it? It's like, yes, okay, that's unasinous behavior. One idiot had the idea to jump off the cliff or the railroad tracks from 300 feet up, and then everybody did it.
And his last name just happened to be Onassis.
Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis.
Yes, yes. I must say, this episode is brought to you by the International Clown and Mascot Union, and yes, we have a newsletter.
God, jeez. Is that a real thing?
I don't know.
I'm sure it is.
But I had to bring it up because we were talking about it in our last episode, which, by the way, if you missed the last episode, you got to check that one out. That's some good stuff.
Yeah. Download it now wherever you download your favorite podcast.
Well, and speaking of downloads, I just recently was watching All Things Must Pass, which is a documentary that was released in 2015 about the rise and fall of Tower Records. And one of
your favorite place.
Yeah, the place that is near and dear to my heart because it was one of those record stores, being from a small town and growing up in the 80s and 90s, before the internet, the only way you could ever see things physically in person from a small town that you had seen in all the catalogs and seen on TV was to go to a place like Tower Records, because, you go to a big city and then it's like, whoa, they've got this. Whoa, they've got that. And of course, as a young child, I would spend a lot of money on CDs. And I think that's when my parents knew that I enjoyed music. But yeah, no, it's, oh, absolutely. I believe that. And yeah. And so it was kind of cool because it was a good documentary on kind of how the world evolved in the internet digital age. And obviously, it didn't really go into detail on the downloading and the Napster point of view, but it really did talk a lot about how the music industry just really kind of morphed from being something that viewed retail as a tried and true partner in the business relationship, and how the records labels where one of the reasons why Tower Records became so successful was because they were located just blocks away from where many of the record labels were headquartered in Los Angeles. And so it was kind of known as a store, at least the LA store, as a store that you would probably see someone like Elton John frequenting and actually buying their own music or other people's music at these establishments. And I didn't realize that Elton John is such a huge fan of vinyl. There's many different. Yeah.
What isn't Elton John a fan of?
Well, he's a huge collector of vinyl, is what I'm saying. And I had no idea.
He's a collector of everything.
Well,
he's a collector of clothes for sure.
Well, I could see that, but
he had I recall hearing that he had a $35,000 a day shopping habit at the boutiques in London when he lived there. $35,000 a day on clothing. Now, you just do the math on that and see what it adds up to. He is known as a very bombastic spender, though. That mansion that he built in France is, only Louis XIV's outdoes his at, so. Well,
he was featured in the documentary, and I really thought that it was kind of cool just to kind of be nostalgic, and obviously, that I collect vinyl records as well, and
yeah, we both do. Yeah. You're a little more. I'm more genre specific, so I'm looking for CDs and vinyl, depending on what format is available. Mm-hmm. Your musical tastes are eclectic or wide-ranging doesn't even do it. I mean, you listen to everything.
I do.
The only thing I haven't really ever caught you listening to is death metal, and I'm sure you probably have at least one or two.
I do.
Things tucked away. Oh yeah, I'm sure. Because you're just into everything. See, and if that were me, I wouldn't be talking to you right now because I wouldn't have the money to own a computer or an apartment.
Just be buying everything.
I'd be in a box on the street. I'd literally have gone broke because. So it's a good thing that I have such a genre-specific taste, and that it's so specific. It's so unusual, I suppose, based in just general terms and mainstream terms.
I hit a new milestone in the collecting, hoarding. I'm just going to say collecting phase, because collectors know what their things are worth. Hoarders just collect, and
hoarders don't collect. They just buy. They just pile stuff up.
Yeah, so one of the things that I've started to do now is really get label specific. And so there's kind of a label of jazz records that I have deemed something that pretty much everything I hear from them, I really like. And sonically it sounds good, and musically it sounds good, and the artists are just amazing. And so I've really started kind of drilling into now, okay, I've got to, start collecting this certain label. And so that's when you've got it bad, when you really start getting into the nitty gritty of Discogs and when you even just get it.
Yeah, but there's a lot of nitty to explore in Discogs.
Well, yeah, but I'm just saying, like, when you really start nailing down a specific section of sub music or subcategory within a category. And I would say I think you've officially arrived at vinyl when you even just start a Discogs account, because I think at that point it just everything your buying changes. And I remember when I discovered Discogs.
I think, you mentioned going to the big city, because growing up here, I was a little late, I think, to the table as far as music is concerned, because when my brother's 10 years older, sister's 7 years older, and they got to experience budget. We had budget tapes and records that was here, and we also had DJs that was here. And that was pretty much all a small town like we live in needed to sate the people that bought music. And those were both, of course, independent music stores. They were owned locally by local people that you could order anything from again, at the time, they were printed catalogs, looked like the New York phone directory. They were massive. They could import stuff, and we're talking vinyl back then, no CDs yet, because it was late 70s, early 80s, mid 80s. And then so when I kind of arrived and started getting into music a little bit more heavily in my own teenage years, the first album I ever bought, I had some hand-me-downs from my brother and sister. They were cassettes mostly, because I didn't really have a place to store or play the vinyl. They had the turntables. But the first piece of music I ever bought with my own money, with my allowance, my mom said, okay, you want this? All right, well, you have to use your own money. And I was like, okay, I do. It was Def Leppard Hysteria, and it was on cassette. And that came from Safeway. That came from back when Safeway, the grocery stores actually used to sell music. You could get tapes there, you get records there.
Yeah,
didn't have a huge selection, but anything in the top 40, they had it. But Camelot Music was the place to get music around here.
Oh, yeah.
And they had a pretty good selection. Of course, I knew all the guys and gals that worked there, and they all thought I was great. I thought they were great because I was just in there constantly. And so it was neat. It was good times. You make friends with them. And my taste was off the charts weird as far as they were concerned. I bought all the stuff that had the bizarre album covers that no one else would touch, just to see what it was like. Because there was no internet back then to try it. You had to drop $9.99 plus tax, sales tax.
That was the only way you were going to get it.
Yeah, like what does this sound like? I've got to know. The cover's just so outrageous. I've got to know. And then, of course, half the time it was terrible, and you'd take it back and say, "Will you?" And they're like, "Yeah, but Jack got to quit doing this." So. But one Tower record story that I'll just tell just to share is because then you'd go to Seattle occasionally, and then man, that was where it was all happening. I mean, they had everything, and they had 100 times more than they had in a little town like this.
Yeah.
And I remember seeing it or hearing about it somewhere. I don't recall. It was a Stryper knockoff band. I think they were from Ohio. They were called Strikin'. And I had only heard of them in passing, had never seen anything. It was just never thought I would. Go to Seattle, thumbing around through Tower Records. It was nighttime. I don't remember why we were there. It must have been a sporting event. That's why we went a lot of times. Found that cassette tape at Tower Records, of all things, Strikin'. And the tape was red. The actual plastic shell of the cassette tape was red. And I remember the first song on it was called Crush the Head of Satan. And I was just like, oh, my God, this is fantastic. I mean, I didn't buy it. Why I passed on it.
Was it like a German death metal, or what was it?
No, they were from the States. And this was, I don't want to say it was pre-death metal, but death metal was in its mega infancy back then. The band Possessed out of San Francisco is credited with being really, I think they're the world's first death metal band because the vocals matched up. But they were really more of a thrash band with death metal style vocals. But they were from San Francisco. Strikin' was, like I said, a Stryper knockoff. They were a Christian metal band, but it was just straight ahead metal. It wasn't anything too extreme. But the first song on the album was called Crush the Head of Satan, and I passed on that. It's a terrible record, by the way, too, because I've subsequently heard it many years ago. But today you can go and find it online, YouTube, anything's there, easily. But at the time, again, it was like, wow, here it is, Jack, Strikin', with Crush the Head of Satan on a red cassette tape. This could be the purchase of the century. It's right here. I passed on it, and I actually did good that time for restraining myself because it's not good. I salute all the guys that used to be in Strikin', but fellas, you missed with me. I didn't like it. So anyway,
I even thought that the listening stations at Tower were really cool, and I never lived in the era when you would have the listening rooms. But the listening stations was a game changer because you could go and you could listen to the music before you bought it, which that was really cool.
Yeah, and now today, I mean, obviously you can do the same thing. Just about everything I buy can be fully download it if you prefer to just skip the process of paying back the musicians for their work off of YouTube. But I kind of have rules for that, and I spend plenty of money on new CDs, so I think I pay the artist back enough. But yeah, there's really not much. You can't control it. And so I always appreciate artists that are willing to just toss it up on YouTube and say, here it is. I mean, if you're going to use one of those YouTube downloaders to rip it, whatever, we're going to sell what we sell. And really, we're doing this for the right reasons, which is we want to be creative. We're artists, and we want people to hear our music. And that was the thing about doing any endeavor, like we've already talked about in our episode about intellectual property, where Jack took another piss all over something that's supposed to be the industry standard. Is just like, no, I mean, I want to do these things creatively speaking for the right reason. Who wouldn't want to have an audience? That's why I get pissed when I see, fucking Lars Ulrich in a suit and tie in the 90s up before Congress talking about how he's losing all this money to Napster in the early 2000s. That was disgusting. And that validated why I was never much of a Metallica fan. First of all, they fired Dave Mustaine. How the hell do you fire Dave Mustaine? That's outrageous. The guy's a genius. I mean, and Megadeth kicks Metallica's ass, and you can write me letters all day long about that. I'll take you to town on it. It's just a matter of taste. It doesn't, it's not really a thing to fight about. But I just always thought that was despicable, because Lars is already rich, and he's already rich pounding on drums, which is something that a lot of people don't get the luxury of doing every day, especially for the kind of money that he banks. And he's up there whining about the fact that he's not rich enough, and somebody else may be, keeping him from being as rich as he could be by listening to the music that he performs. When, if we back up to 1979, Lars Ulrich, the guy would do anything to be heard, anything at all. And it's amazing how quickly we'll trade our soul and our artistic vision and the desire to share our artistic prowess with the world, if we even possess any, by public opinion, for $1 bill or two. And that really upset me. I remember just absolutely being like, yeah, fuck Metallica. I don't really care for them anyway, and I'll not ever listen to them again now that Lars Ulrich has shown up in Congress asking for them to shut down a way to share art with everybody, because he's just not rich enough. That pissed me off, and I think it should have pissed off anybody that ever liked them, quite frankly, or ever. Well,
that's another documentary, or another. I think it's on Netflix. There's a series on the Napster phenomenon, and if you haven't seen that one, I would highly recommend it. I think I got through episode 1, and I've still got to dive back into that. But that was an amazing documentary.
What was the kid's name that started it? Brian something?
Yeah, and there was a group of people who, one of them actually worked at a factory where CDs were made. And he would take the music before it was released, and he would upload it to these servers, and those guys would just, and it became kind of a game with them on who could get the pre-release before the other server. And it really put the record companies on edge, because they couldn't move fast enough. And that's a really cool documentary too.
Yeah, I didn't use Napster a whole lot, but I know that the old Memorex 60-minute or 90-minute blank cassette tape was the big enemy of the Hollywood record industry and the big label industry back in the 80s and the 70s, I suppose, but really more the 80s, because I used to buy them cases at a time. And of course we tape traded, and because you got holes in your pockets. I mean, we were kids. We're in high school, and the idea behind our desire to share music was pure. I want to put as much music in my ears as I can because I enjoy it. Do you know anybody that ever went to prison?
No.
Even the guy with Napster, like, we're talking probably billions of downloads that he facilitated illegally. He didn't get a lick of friggin' jail time, let alone these. So I always thought that was like the FBI warnings at the beginning of VHS cassette tapes.
Yeah, the Interpol.
As if somehow they're watching you. Like, we know you're about to rip this copy of Extro 2, and we're not about to fucking have it. So you're going to go to prison and you're going to sit next to murderers, baby killers for 25 years if you rip Extro 2 that you rented from the video store. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
Art is not for sale. Art is to be shared with everything. Art is an expression of everything.
Their excuse was that you would be able to make copies of your own music library. Do you remember hearing that?
Yeah.
Yeah. You can make copies of your own library in case you lose something. Oh, okay.
Well, and the thing is, there was always that kid who was touchy about it. Like most of us were just like, of course, hey, can I rip this? Oh, yeah, great. Yeah, bring it over. I'll rip it. Stay over at my house tonight, rip it. But there was always that Stuart kid from Beavis and Butthead who was like, gosh, guys, I don't think we should be doing this. Like, oh, my God.
Yeah.
You're like 14 and you're already paranoid that the federal government is spying on your tape trading activities. Jesus. I mean, can we possess a lick of freedom before we get absolutely just chained to this system? Oh, my God.
I was kind of that way when the internet started, though, because my screen name actually ended up on the list. And that was a big issue because there was a list circulating, and the recording artist in RIAA was all big on, hey, we've got this list of names that people who've been downloading, and of course my name was on it, and I was thinking, oh crap, my life is over.
You made the list? Michael Elliott made the list.
Yeah,
I had no idea that you were on a criminal conspiracy list. That's awesome.
Yeah, the Napster list. I was on it, and 5 million of my cohorts right beside me.
Conspiracy to kidnap, stir some tunes, baby. I love it. That's awesome. Download as much as you want. Step up to the banquet and feast.
Yes, I know.
Feast for the ears.
Well, and it kind of makes you wonder, too, like that technology... I'm surprised that it wasn't more heavily censored. I know that Napster went away and they tried to make it legitimate, and then nobody really cared about it. And then this thing magically came into the purview overnight, which was Apple Music. And it was just like Napster, except for, it was the legitimate clean version. Yeah, and you paid for it. And Napster tried, but they just couldn't make the pay for it work for them. And
well, no, once it's free, that's like going home after being married for 20 years and having her say, $50, please. You can no, I don't think so. I mean, once you've gotten it for free, you're not going to start paying for it. No, come on. It's a good thing, honestly, that even though I think there's an oversaturation of everything today when it comes to what might be viewed as entertainment. I mean, there's so many YouTubers, there are so many vloggers and bloggers and TikTokers, and social media to me is out of control, and it's about to have a serious contraction, if you ask me, at some point in the near future. It's not going to take that long, but it's still nice to be able to download all this content, or at least have it available, because you can find some pretty cool shit, as I know you just did the other day with this thing in Montana. You sent it to me. See, we're tape trading because you sent me a YouTube video, but now it's perfectly fine.
Exactly. No,
but you sent me this YouTube video, and it's like some kind of wall. They discovered Luke's wall in Montana somewhere.
Yeah, it's actually called the Sage Wall, and there's a website, sagemountain.org. And I don't know how I got on this. The internet is an amazing thing, isn't it? And somehow it showed up on my feed, and I clicked on it, and the title was something like, "Do you believe this is a man-made or natural structure?" And it is this giant wall that was discovered in Montana, and it's on private property, and the owners of this property were, I guess, at one point just wandering the property, and they stumbled across this wall. And I mean, it looks man-made to me. I don't know that there could be any other explanation for it. I mean, when you look at the wall, there's cubes. I mean, there's blocks, and it looks like it was extremely heavy and well engineered. I don't think they've ever been able to carbon date it at this point as to when they believe this structure was built. I know that there are certain features on these blocks that they've been able, in the video, they talk about kind of maybe the timeline of when this could have been built, because it also has very similar features to the Egyptian architecture and the pyramids. And so they think that there is a chance that they're not that they were built by the same people, but that they were using kind of the same technology as the ancient Egyptians. But it's not really something Montana. We were just talking about Montana a few episodes ago, weren't we? It's not really a place. I was just there. It's not really a place that you would think would hold a monolithic structure.
No, not unless it were some kind of homage to craft beer or like wood carvings or something like that. This is in Whitehall, Montana, by the way, Sage Wall, which is about, looks like on the map, just as the crow flies, maybe 40 miles away from Butte to the east. So what we have to remember, I guess, what this teaches us to remember, I suppose, if that makes any sense, is there was a time before Montana, because, yes, it does not seem to compute that ancient megalithic structures would belong in Big Sky Country, but North America has not always had a Montana. In fact, it's only had a Montana for about maybe a little over 100 years, if I'm not mistaken on my dates for statehood, maybe even less than that. But in any event, it's there. And it reminds me of a place that I have been in, another place that you would not guess that there would be something ancient and mysterious like that. A little bit more is known about this, although maybe not a lot. It's called Serpent Mound, and it's in Ohio. It's in like west central Ohio. And I have been there before. I was there on a very hot, humid July morning to check that out, all by myself. And it's a big snake that has essentially been emblazoned into the earth. And the interesting thing about its geological history is that it's an impact site for a meteor. And one of the theories is that iridium has something to do with this, because iridium is one of the rarest elements. It's one of the rarest materials from the periodic table of elements that exists in the cosmos. Like, it only comes from things like meteorites, and it's not of earthly origin. You can't just dig it out of the ground, I do not believe. It has to come from somewhere else. So it's very rare. And so meteorite impacts, meteors tend to carry iridium, a lot of them. And that's why it's thought this was put there by the ancient peoples. But it's also thought to have potentially been either of Mayan or Aztec origin. And there are some other things in that local area that sort of tip the hand to the fact that this could have been Mesoamerican in design and build, which would indicate that maybe something really did happen to the Maya. They weren't all picked up by a spaceship and taken away to, Uranian Disneyland or something in, the far reaches of the solar system. Maybe they actually did migrate somewhere and try to start anew, or sort of kept to themselves and maybe didn't build the big temples anymore. Hard to say. But this wall, like we were talking about earlier, this is a Pandora's box now, because there's so much interest in this subject globally. And all of the megalithic sites that have been profiled on Ancient Aliens now for like the past 20 years, since that show's been going almost, get so many more visitors than they used to. A couple of them are still on my list. I mean, I still want to go see Pumapunka. The one I really want to see, it's funny because I can never seem to remember the name of it, but it's Tiwanaku, and it's the one that has all the ancient heads in the plaza and the big entryway, the big stone entryway, and they've got the creator god is up above that, Viracocha, and I want to go there. It's like top of the list for places that Jack wants to visit before he's dead. It's actually just across the border, Peruvian border in Bolivia. But yeah, I mean, people got around, and there were different people doing all kinds of things all over the globe. But the dots that are connected, and then, of course, there's the thing about the pyramids and the ziggurats, which even predate those, and the fact that they all are on the same axis lines is very strange. And, I mean, I love those ancient mysteries. They're great. The problem is what do they mean to us? I mean, I guess Jack's always trying to dig deeper for a meaning. To a lot of people, it's just a cool stone ruin that you go see. And I try to leave it at that. But to me, it's sort of what can we learn from this? What could we take away from this now that we've discovered it to incorporate into our modern and seriously troubled and even failing potentially societies that might help us out and might say, hey, try this. We're gone too, but maybe we learned from a mistake that was made. But
yeah, well, on their website, they say that they believe that it's 75 million years old. 75
million. Wow, that's very old.
That is extremely old.
Very, very, very old.
Well, and that's kind of what raises the red flag to me is
75 million?
Yeah. And
wow.
So the Earth is 4.5 billion years old. That's what we have. We've surmised is that it's 4.5 billion years old. Okay. And I understand that there had to be time for the oceans to recede and the mountains to form and the ozone layer to form and oxygen and, all the building blocks of life had to be somehow introduced at some point, depending on what your theory is on that. But I find it interesting that the Earth is 4.5 billion years old. This website is claiming that this monolith or megalith is where, like, Stonehenge, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is a megalith because it's broader than just one.
I think a megalith would refer to an entire structure, whereas a monolith would be, it's a very large singular object. It's a monolith.
Right, okay.
Hence monolith.
Yes, going back to the dictionary reference we had earlier.
Yep.
But
you got it. It's a great Kansas album too, Monolith.
Monolith. But I do think that it's fascinating to me that, okay, even if we say it's 75 million years old, so how many millions go into a billion? And just the fact that our Earth is so old that I think we really, as a society, have to start looking at these objects for their face value and quit trying to jump immediately to this. Now, there already has been, and I ran across this immediately after watching this video, that this megalith is a natural geographical or geological work. And it's just no.
It does not look like it. Without having been there and trying to shove a piece of paper.
Jack and I are not...
shove my electric bill between the slits, and trying to... That's sort of the tricks that you're supposed to do. Again, like Puma Punku, where the blocks are so tight that they'll cut you. The etchings on the blocks are so tight. It does not look to be of natural construction, of just organic construction. Stones don't stack like that. No matter, the Earth is remarkable, but it has its own way of, chiseling architecture that human beings really can't, because Earth has time on its hands.
Right.
So where Earth can create something like Arches National Park, if you've been there like I have, you could probably fake that, but when you got close enough to it, you'd say, oh, this was somebody faked Arches National Park because they won the state lottery and they just wanted something cool to look at in their backyard. When you look at those stones, those sandstone formations in Utah in the desert, you literally see the millions of years of scouring that it takes to create such an object. I mean, you literally can see it. You can't because, of course, the material that was scoured is gone. It's blown away. It's literally back to Kansas, dust in the wind. But you can see the process took the hands of time. It took an instrument that has millions of years to work in clay and shape whatever it is that it wants to, whereas human beings don't have that luxury. The story with this, I was not aware. I guess I must have skipped over that or didn't hear it in that part. Like I said, you watched the whole thing. I wasn't able to watch the whole thing, but I saw some of it. 75 million years
It's on their
old
website. I just read this. It's on their website.
Michael, that would put it like so much older than anything that we're talking about right now. Like Göbekli Tepe, which they've unearthed in the Middle East, in, I believe it's Turkey, somewhere in that area. I mean, that is old by human standards. And what this does is it pushes the envelope of how long have human beings been running around doing human stuff here on Earth. Originally, we were told about 12 to 15,000 years with the cradle of civilization in Mesopotamia. Then artifacts that started showing up in Central Asia and connected to the Hindu background and the Hindu history, those kinds of things, were starting to push that envelope by like tens of thousands of years. People were saying, okay, maybe 30, even 40,000 years humans have been around. Then Göbekli Tepe maybe teases us to say it's been about 60 or even longer, if I remember correctly. 75 million?
Yeah.
That would equate to civilizations that were absolutely around at the time of dinosaurs walking the earth or in between those times. And it would more than suggest that sentient human beings or that sentient life forms, be they human or not, it'd probably be something else, obviously it was that old, but that beings that were able to build and would therefore assumably be sentient because they would have a reason to do so, that was attached to an understanding that their lives here were ephemeral, that they were going to start and they were going to end, and they needed shelter and they needed, that would more than suggest all of that it's been here before, and that every so often that basically the Hopis are right, that basically the Maya are right, that the world in a living sense, in a cultural sense, I suppose, world globally at least, is reborn every so often, that these things grow up and then they're eradicated for whatever reason, either by natural processes or by some god that says, okay, it's time to shake the ant farm and start over. And we go through it again. I don't know, but that 75 million, that is an alarming number. That's fantastic. I mean,
well, and just looking at the reaction on your face, this is kind of why I wanted to bring this up, is because, why are we constantly fighting this narrative that we're almost fighting to prop up at this point? And I think that something that my high school science teacher always used to say to us was, everything equal under the sun. And I always used to go, well, what does that mean? There are things under the sun that we don't know and we don't understand. And I think that is kind of the way that we should be looking at these things. Is they're fascinating. Why are we trying to make up a narrative that they're a naturally formed part of meteorological, geological power? And it's just like, that's absurd.
Well, I think maybe to cut right to it, we're failing. It doesn't take much to realize that we as a species are failing. And I think it troubles us in it's a way that's very acutely existential. That's a big way of saying that it burns us right to the core of why we're here. Mm-hmm. But we don't really know what to do about it, because there's so much that we've learned that we need to forget about, that we need to leave behind us, and we just aren't able to do that yet. It's hard to go through an awakening, not only, let alone individually, but as a collective. That's going to be very challenging. Mm-hmm. But, I was just looking at something that I wrote down some time ago, and I think it's applicable now, so I'll just say it. I mean, life fucks with us because it makes it interesting. Yeah. It really does. So whenever you individually are wondering to yourself, God, why is this happening to me? Because it makes your existence interesting. And it may not be fair. In fact, it probably isn't. It doesn't have anything to do with that. It has to do with this experience being worth something. There's something of value besides just plodding along and doing what you're biologically prone to doing and just sort of getting by. I mean, that's to me where I'm offended, because it's supposed to be the case that we're able to think and feel and be so much more than animals, which I think is rubbish, quite frankly. If you have ever looked at a cat that is, drinking milk out of its saucer, or that is playing with a ball, or has got a mouse out of a field that is batting around, or a dog that's under similar circumstances, or, pick your TikTok or YouTube video of the kangaroo at the zoo, or the capybara that's nosing around the pumpkin, or whatever. Those creatures are fascinated with this experience. They are enthralled with the opportunity to do those things with the limited physical capabilities that they have, and also mentally as well. And then there's us. And we ascribe to do nothing more than be the same. Let's put a ball into a hole over and over and over again for 3 hours and see how many balls go in one hole more than another. I don't mean to rip basketball, but come on, we've got more within us than that. So rather than focusing as much on that, maybe we put our attention into a variety of things, and we come back to that when we really need to recharge and just go back to our more, dare I say, primal selves. We're failing.
Well, I think you've got a point there.
And it's troubling to us, and we don't know what to do.
I do, because it kind of reminds you of that movie. Capybaras actually happened to be my 9-year-old's favorite animal, by the way. Which
the world's largest rodent, yeah.
I find that very interesting that that's her favorite animal, a capybara.
My girlfriend loves capybaras.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so it's kind of like that movie Don't Look Up. Do you remember that movie?
Vaguely.
So it's almost like we keep doing the same thing over and over again. We keep putting the ball in the hole. We keep putting the ball in the hole. We keep putting the ball in the hole. And then when we start questioning it, it's like, nope, that doesn't exist. Keep putting the ball in the hole. Keep putting the ball in the hole. And then eventually the government says, well, what hole? And that hole doesn't exist.
Yeah, right.
And you're not supposed to do it that way anymore. You're supposed to do it this way now.
It's the witch hole honey campaign.
Yeah. You know what I mean, though? And it's just,
right.
To me, it's kind of like that movie Don't Look Up, where it's like, well, we know it's there. We don't want you to start questioning why it's there. And I think you can put in any kind of conspiracy theory or theory. I'm going to quit saying conspiracy theory, because I've almost evolved to the point where I feel like it's a theory, whether I agree with it or not. And I'm not going to tell somebody or put somebody else's theories down or label them to try and make myself feel better. So from now on, I'm not going to say conspiracy theory. I'm just going to say theory. There's a lot of theories out there that Area 51 is used as a secret base for government technology and exploration of weapons, whatever. We've talked about that. We think that that's crazy because, well, why would you put it out there and say, oh, well, here it is? Yeah. But at the same time, it's like, well, come on, guys. Like, why wouldn't you just go, yeah, this is interesting. Let's look into this.
There's a lot of reasons why, I suppose, and who has control and who's controlling the narrative and what they, again, want us to know and what they don't want us to know for whatever reason. I say we skip all that. I really say we just forget about those guys. We just all collectively give them the middle finger and say, you do whatever it is that you're going to do. And what that allows you to do then is be free of it allows you to be free of them controlling that narrative for you. You can sort of make up your own mind, because if you're going to be lied to anyway, then why not make up your own mind? Because a lie is just as good as anything you may come up with that might actually not exactly be right in some scientific way. But then, So what? What does it matter? And remember this, too, that the living is in the question. The questions that we have is where we live our lives. It's where we truly experience this thing we call living. The wonder and the amazement of, boy, how did that happen? Where does this come from? Why am I here? Why is that happening to me? Why is this happening to me today? That is where all of the living is done. As soon as you have an answer, you're dead. That question dies, and the living dies with it. And there's nothing wrong with death. It's just transformation. But to me, that is one of the reasons why we are not innately programmed to be gods, essentially. We cannot know our origins. And I am convinced personally in some small way that even gods, may they exist somewhere, or incredibly advanced beings of some spiritual context that we can't even fathom, still can't even really comprehend infinity, because you're not allowed to. Because there's got to be at least one question left for you to answer, for you to really survive, for you to live in this miracle. Because what is a miracle? Can you define a miracle? Do you want to define a miracle? Because science is running around saying we're going to define this, we're going to define that. And science is fine. It saved my ass a few times medically, and it comes in handy once in a while. But science is a part of the miracle. It's not it doesn't supersede it. And so to me, it's important to remember that all of these questions that we have and all these things that frustrate us and we want to know so badly, that's where you're alive.
Yeah.
The truth is out there is where the living is done because you're seeking, you're searching. As soon as you've found whatever it is that you're looking for, like they say, life is a journey. Mm-hmm. That's what I'm saying. So as soon as the journey's over, you found what you're looking for. There's a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. Well, I got all the gold I want in the world. So what in the hell would I want to look for anything else for? See, that's dying. And that's contradictory. That's counterintuitive to what the whole purpose of being here is about. And yet that's exactly what we're told to do, is come up with a great idea. The new American dream, right, as far as I'm concerned. Come up with a great idea. It used to be run the family business or have it passed down to you, or learn a trade, or invent something that you're really, really, really proud of, that you really, really, really think is going to help people in the world, and then stand behind it for a lifetime and pass it on to your kids if hopefully they're interested in it. Now the new American dream is come up with a great idea, build it up just so far, get a corporate offer for a ton of money, sell out, retire to a private island, fuck the world.
Jack Hansen's retirement plan, ladies and gentlemen. You're so correct there. And I think that's why I find this so interesting, that and maybe that's why I kind of have started to reevaluate what I've been told, or what I've been told to believe, or what I did believe, and really kind of start to question even the foundation of the people who were trying to teach me these things, is because it's like, well, wait a minute. Clearly this wall is not a natural occurrence. I think we can all see that. And even the people who are denying it can see that. And then you kind of start to go back and go, okay, well, now being a critical thinker that we are, why are they trying to deny us of that? And what is it about that whole idea that makes them uneasy?
Interestingly enough, all the kids who used to work at Starbucks when I would go there, and they were all the ones that wanted to know more about astrology and wanted their charts done, and that sort of thing. They were always seemingly the ones I was running into who were the kids who were raised super religious, with that iron fist of theology, and then at some point just, gave the middle finger to it all. Just something happened, and they saw an injustice in it. And typically those are the stories that have been shared with me. Is I turned out to have an attraction for a certain gender that was not considered appropriate. And yet I knew in my heart that this was what I wanted. This was what I wanted to fill my part of my experience with. And so I turned my back on everything that I had known and learned and been told up to that point, because I found something that fired off enough passion and verity in me to ditch it, to basically say this is baggage. And that is a scary parachute to open.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just social, contacts like that. It wasn't just things like that I would hear various stories. That was one of them that I heard. I heard another one, that it had to do with the pursuit of a certain career, and it was not, it was frowned upon by the parents. And so, but that was what they were here to do. And they knew that. And that passion, that, innateness, that spiritual drive, just, it won out over the theology. It won out over, I don't care if I've been told this and you think this is what's going to happen to me as a result of it. I'm going to do it anyway. That takes a lot of courage. But before you completely bastardize the people that came before you, that told you these things, and that, as you said, you were raised with, and remember that most of them did not stop to ask the question that you are. Most of them did not question it themselves. And so we can't really blame someone too much for allowing themselves to stay in a state of what I would consider to be ignorance. I mean, if a certain theology works for you, whether you were raised with it or not, fine.
Who's to say that theology and evolution can't coexist?
Well, they can.
And so why are we trying to fight it?
I mean, so God, whatever God is real, and she snaps its fingers and says, I've just created all of these things. Now go forth and evolve. There.
Creation.
I literally just solved the mystery. I mean, it's going to the dollar store and buying a little package of rubber dinosaurs and emptying them out and saying, now go forth and be.
Our thoughts, just think about this.
Get flushed down the toilet.
Our thoughts evolve every day. And so why is that such a bad...
They have no choice.
Exactly. Why is that such a bad concept? And I think a lot of people would also argue that, you know what, if God didn't want us to have these thoughts and these discussions, he wouldn't have allowed them to exist.
That's a very good point.
He wouldn't have given us the capacity. He would not have given us the capacity to have these kinds of conversations. And I think that we're limiting our potential by so much, by grasping onto these things. Just think about how many years we have been in this common era. 2024 years. And they said that they don't even refer to it to AD anymore because they want to bring in the non-believers of Jesus Christ. So they want to call it the common era. Whatever your belief is, whatever that is.
All right, that's fine, whatever.
There was a whole nother blog on that. And I didn't even want to get into that discussion.
No, I can see why.
But, I mean, I guess let's just say that there's been 2024 years of this common era. And we still cannot even get to the moon, which is the closest planet to Earth in our solar system, without burning a ton of fossil fuel. Now, how advanced are we when you really think about it?
Well, that's technology, I mean, that we're sort of playing against.
It's also technology.
Your ideological model.
It's also technology that is being restrained because of our inability to create an alternative to that fossil fuel. And there's another blog and another huge Reddit group that will talk about fuels and the technology behind those and how, you know what, folks, the Tic Tac, if anything, is explaining to us or showing us in real time, in physics, for that matter, that if we keep clinging on to these fossil fuels, you're only going to go so far.
Well, there's only so many of them left. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, again, Jack Hansen's story, I'm flying to Barrow, Alaska. We're actually flying to Prudhoe Bay because the plane that goes from Anchorage to Barrow, or Utqiagvik as it's actually known by its native name now, it stops in Prudhoe Bay first to let off all of the people that work for Exxon that are up there that are in charge of the pipeline.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting next to a woman who actually works up there, and we're flying up there, and I hate flying too. So you're not going to hear too many flying stories from Jack, that's for sure. But I'm sitting next to this woman on the plane, and she's actually going to Utqiagvik for the summer solstice celebration that they have there, and I'm going with my brother. And we're sitting there and we're chatting, and we're talking about her. She's talking about something, and I just said, "So, how long they say the oil reserves up here are going to last?" And she just said, "What do you mean?" And I said, "Well, there's only so much compressed dinosaur and plant matter in the earth to suck out, to refine, to stick into all of these things that fly around and drive around. And, so what's the latest on how long we have left in that reserve? 25 years, 30? And she was just awestruck. She was just baffled. She just looked at me and said, "Well, forever."
Suckle
and I was like, no, sweetheart, not forever, honey. I'm sorry. I don't mean to be, I don't mean to switch into that mode, but it's like, oh, you poor thing. No, not forever. Maybe long enough for you to have a job still, but not forever.
Well,
so
and why
there's
is
only so much of that we're going to be able to do anyway.
Why is the topic of alternative fuels, we'll just call them fuels because that's how our brains think about it, alternative fuels, such a polarizing topic? Because, I mean, think about what you just brought up. I mean,
because money is at stake.
Yeah.
Because people's ability to be better than other people because they have more illusory zeros behind their name in their bank account is at risk. That is why.
Yeah.
And it's all over something that isn't even real. And that's the real insanity about it. I mean, I wouldn't be for this game anyway, but at least before there was this global monetary system and this game we played with all this money that doesn't exist.
Right.
Just think about it. Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos, they have all this money. No, they don't. They have numbers.
Yeah.
They just have numbers. It's owed to them in some way per this game that we play, but all they really truly own is whatever tangibilities that they actually own that they can fence off are. And really what they truly own is nothing. Just ask the Egyptians about that one. They used to bury themselves with all their shit.
Yeah.
Think any of them came back to get it? I mean, I don't want to squash Egyptian mythology or theology, but I don't think you're coming back to get all that gold, and you don't need it. You don't need it. You arrive naked and alone, and you leave naked and alone in so many ways. You're not taking any of this stuff with you. So it's a ridiculous, stupid, perpetual, mindless, regressive game that someone invented and said, let's play this, and let's force everybody to play it. And my idea for those bastards has been for years, look, give them Australia. Remember Superman 1, or Superman 2, actually it is, where the three criminals break out of the flat prison in space.
Prism.
Then they all have all the same powers as Superman, and they come down to the planet, and then Lex gets involved, and Lex Luthor knows how to find Superman. So he says, what do you want? He says, Australia. So he gives him Australia. I say give him Australia. If you want to play that game, cordon off like an eighth of the planet, a tenth of the planet. Australia's perfect. It's just the right size. If you want to go play that game, there's your little land to go play that little game with. We'll leave you alone to play your game. And don't come crying to us when it all goes afoul and Australia sinks, because it's doomed. Because the game is doomed from the beginning, because it's a fucking game. It's stupid. The rest of us are going to get on with existing in this miracle. The rest of us are going to get on with living the miracle of being here. So you guys go play your game. And I think if we can back up, a little bit before the station, the train pulled into the fossil fuel station, I think it goes back to ego. I think, why are we pulling out all of these things like you're saying about why do we have to immediately set up a narrative to say, oh, well, this thing that's 75 million years old, that has been carbon dated and it can't possibly be, well, it's a natural thing and that's the end of it. I think it goes back to ego. I think it always goes back to the fact that the scientists or even the theologians or even the lay people who are not in either camp, who are just afraid of not feeling like they know, have to just live in denial and say, well, that's it, we know.
Yeah, that's true.
The miracle of being here, though, as I just said, the true miracle of being here is to walk around and not know, is to walk around and say, the wise man says always, I don't know. The wisest man in the world, the wisest people in the world will tell you, I don't know why that is. I can tell you just so much based on my experience, based on the rocks that I've uncovered myself and been able to look at and turn around a million times myself. I can tell you what they've told me, but I can't tell you where they came from. I can't tell you how they got here. I can't tell you who assembled them in this order. I can't tell you the whys. Maybe there is no why. The wisest of people you run into will have that right out in front of them. The best people, honestly, that will get you the farthest in life as your friend or as anything to you are going to have that right out in front of them. Listen, I don't know, and I love it. I like it that way. Those people are stable. People who are, oh my God, they unearthed something that's 75 million. No, it can't be. It's not true. It's not true. And that's it. And that's all there is to it. Those people are unstable. I think it goes back to ego and it goes back to fear. And they're packaged together in this bizarre amalgam that I just personally, just avoid it like the plague. I mean, wish them the best and then be on your way and just rest in the solace that you don't know. And let it be a mystery. There are some things, remember, that we are going to have to resign to. It's just a fucking mystery. We don't know, and we never will. It's like watching those detective shows. There's literally absolutely no reason for this guy to just vanish off the face of the planet, and yet he does. I mean, and he does it, you know, he went to get a hero sandwich, left the office to get a hero sandwich at 12:30 and never came back, and the video shows him going in looking like he always does, getting a hero sandwich and then leaving, and that's the last anybody ever saw the fucking guy. And you know what? That's the last anybody will. That's it. We are probably never going to know what really happened to that guy. Yeah. And that used to drive me crazy just from like the standpoint of, oh my God, I have to, but then it's a great lesson. Take a step back, Jack, and remember, you're at ease with the biggest things in life. You have to be at ease with some of the things that are a little bit more localized. You're never going to know. And you have to just accept that. You have to accept the not knowing, because knowing only gets you so far. The knowing in tangible terms, the being able to pick it apart and put up a graph and a pie chart and say, this was here and this goes there. And the scientific exploration the empirical exploration can only go so far. But the knowing that happens on that level, and you know what I'm talking about as a spiritual guy yourself, that just knowing that is intangible, that is just ethereal, that's where it's at. That's what's critical. The only thing to watch with that, and we can dissect this at another time, is righteousness. The only thing with that knowing is making sure that you do not go down a path of overt righteousness, because it will override the knowing real quick. And I think that's what happened to a lot of our ancestors who really had the best thing in mind for themselves and their people, who maybe were popes or cardinals, or maybe they were, states of empires that had religion, and it went awry because it's really easy when you combine that sense of knowing with a lot of power and control to go down the righteous path and really trip up. So watch out for it.
Well, and I think it's interesting, too, how it always seems like it's a cycle. And it seems like you go from not knowing to knowing, and then by knowing, you then realize how much you don't know.
That's very true as well. Yeah.
And so then it just kind of keeps going in this cycle of, okay, well, that seems plausible. Let's go down that path a little bit. And again, let's just throw this out there. The universe is a ginormous place. We don't know where the beginning, the genesis of that universe was.
Well, but scientists tell you they found it, though.
But we don't really know. And
no, we don't.
The Earth is 4.5 billion with a B years old. This monolith, according to their website, they're saying that it's dated around 75 million years old.
Wow.
So, that would suggest that even saying that our civilization, and I don't even know how you would justify what our civilization is in terms of years, but our, say, modern sense of civilization might not have been the only one on this neighborhood.
Yeah, no, that's what I think I was more than alluding to earlier, was the fact that this is like, it's a cycle where we've got beings who were here, whether they sprung up organically through, again, some kind of evolutionary process. They were here crawling out of the muck and the ooze from some ancient Pangea, or whether they landed here from somewhere else, or they were seeded here from panspermia or whatever. They're here, and they grow or are already at a point where they're building stuff 75 million years ago. And I think, again, what that probably does is it shakes us to the core, because we go, shit, we're done. We're cooked. Because what happened to them? Did they live forever? Are they still here? Are they still going on? Maybe there are remnants of them in some way that we might find in genetics, I guess, that would go that far back. But chances are it's just, they had their turn. Like I always say when people die and people come to me and because people will do that. They'll just be like, hey, Jack, did you hear Fred Sawyer died the other day? And I'm just like, well, we get our turn. And people are like, what's that supposed to mean? I'm just like, well, what are you supposed to say? I mean, we do, don't we? We all individually, as like individual identities in this experience, we get our turn and then it's over.
Thank the Lord it wasn't me.
Yeah, right. Yeah, we get NIMBY about it. I'm just glad it wasn't me. Well, it's really cool, and maybe, because I have reasons to go to Montana now. It's a little more than I used to, so maybe I'll get a chance to check it out at some point in the future, and I can give you a full briefing on Jack's opinion on at least what this Sage's Wall is.
I would like that. In fact, maybe we could record the podcast from the Sage Wall, because all we have to do is pay $140 collectively. And we'll have, I think, 2 hours. So that's more than enough time to record.
They want $70 to get into this thing?
They want $70 a person to get into this
Good
thing.
Fucking God.
Well, if you look at their website, they've got like a visitor center, which also probably doubles as the living room, if you think about it. But there's a visitor center and everything, right? I mean,
$70 a pop.
$70. And I think we could probably interview the owners of the property. We could talk to them a little bit about this. Maybe even get a few tchotchkes while we're in the gift shop. Who knows?
I have a new theory now that I've heard that they're charging $70 a pop to see it. This is not 75 million years old. It's 75 days old, and it was put together with Play-Doh, so they would have a reason to charge $70 a head to get in to see the damn thing. $70.
Maybe Stephen Greer will be there while we're there, too. You can talk to him about that.
Well, if there's that many people crawling around there, it's probably not the best contact site. So
that's what I'm thinking. But, I'm thinking it's probably going to be overrun and closed down within a matter of years. And
I hope not. I would rather go there than any Disney property any day. And by the way, that's a record that I have and will always have. I have still at almost 51. I'll turn 51 next week, and have still never. The closest I went to Disneyland is I actually drove through Anaheim and saw it from the freeway. And I think I've said this before. I don't mind the characters, and I don't mind some of the artwork, and I don't mind the artistry behind it and the expressionism behind it. But the corporateering, absolutely not. I mean, and the sheep that they get to line up at Magic Mountain. I mean, you got people taking a shit in line. You hear about this? I mean, this came out last year, I think, last summer. Yeah, you got people who literally they're standing in line to go down like some coaster or something. Like I said, I don't know. I don't go to these things. It doesn't do anything for me. And they don't want to lose their place in line, so they're defecating in line.
In the Magic Kingdom?
Yeah, there's shit to be hessed in the Magic Kingdom. No wonder we're failing. No wonder we're going down in flames fast. And yeah, you can write me all the hate you want. I can't stand Disney, and I always will despise it. So send me the hate. I love it.
Do you think that Disney's going to license a brand of adult diapers after hearing about this defecation?
I wouldn't be surprised. They're like some of the biggest industrious souls that there are on the planet. I don't think they have souls, though. So I just wonder where all the mentalists are. I guess they're at home making podcast notes for the next time around, like me, because I'm not out at the water park or at Disneyland splashing around. It ends at Disneyland.
The Earth being 4.5 billion years old with a B, and the fact that...
here, I got it.
So that would be, let me just do the math real quick. 4. So 75 million years could fit 6 times into 4.5 billion years. Okay. So give or take a billion for, let's say, just...
the primordial ooze to settle.
Exactly, right?
Right.
I would gather that there has at least been 3 different... at the very least, 3 different
iterations
of our being, if you think about that, and I think
or some being,
for that matter. And that right there in a nutshell is probably what they're afraid of. Well, Jack Hansen, here's to not knowing.
Absolutely. I'll raise 2 glasses of purified water to that notion.
And make sure we tip our server on the way out. She was very nice today.
And enjoy the riffing of Charlie Para del Rigo. I found this on YouTube years ago. It's the He-Man opening theme, metal guitar version. So, love it.
Bless you, Charlie.
Well, it looks like Jack and Michael have finished up their latest chat about all things existence. But if anything they said got your own Existence Brewing, be sure and catch their other talks at existencebrewing.com and drop them an email to share your thoughts using contact@existencebrewing.com.
Existence Brewing.